Hello and welcome to the Technical Footballer Podcast, dedicating to creating better players with advice from professionals all across the country. Today we are joined by Coventry United's Hayley Crackle, and she speaks to us about preventing injuries within the game.
Previously, I played for Villa for 15 years, so I started at under-10s level and then went all the way up to seniors. And then I've also played for Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland seniors as well. So yeah, senior international level, and I'm currently playing in the championship.
Lovely. And I believe that's our second Northern Ireland international, right? I think Charlie also played as well.
Yeah, he does. Even though his brother played for Republic of Ireland.
Get some caliber on the show. Get some caliber.
International stars, nothing else.
Lovely. But yeah, as mentioned, today's topic was going to be on preventing injuries in football. Obviously, a very, very big topic because of how common injuries are within the game. So this is just to give out some advice to how to stop it in the meantime. The first question was Hayley. Do you have a pre-match warm-up that you do to try and prevent injuries? Obviously, I think we've seen heat spray. I think we've seen foam rollers in the past. Sometimes it might be like a special meal that you eat beforehand. Is there anything particular that you do yourself?
First of all, it depends on like the time of like kickoff. So if we've got an evening kickoff, I always eat like 4 hours before. If you've got an early kickoff, it's quite difficult because you have to get up. I would get up earlier to have a meal 4 hours before. I'm quite particular with that because I like it to digest. In terms of like on an actual game day before we go out and do our like team warm up, I like to just do more mobility type of things. They leave out foam rollers and lacrosse balls and stuff that you can like roll on, but I'm not really kind of into that. I'd rather just do a bit of hip mobility, stretching, that sort of thing. But that's probably only for the last 2 years. When I was younger, and I think most kids are the same. Growing up, you kind of just get your heart rate up and you feel like you're ready to go. You get a bit older and you think, actually, I need to take a step back here and do some hamstring mobility, some stuff on your hips, that sort of thing. So I think as you get older, that sort of changes compared to when you're younger.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Curtis, you've got a few stories about that where like it's been someone that you've known that's been quite easy going, like they won't do any stretches and they'll just go kick a ball and do anything, whereas you on the other hand, and me actually, I have to stretch big time. Yeah.
Definitely, as I say, I'm very envious of the player that can sort of just get their boots on, run straight onto the pitch and start pinging balls around. I'm definitely one of those I'll probably say from when I turned about 17, 18 and I started to have my first like couple of like, sort of major injuries and stuff. I've definitely been one that has to focus on the warming up, doing my proprioception work before I go out. And yeah, just really focus on, because as I say, I've been always, sorry guys, I'm a bit, I don't even know what I was saying there, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so start again.
I was going to edit that bit out.
Yeah, we've got some editing skills going on today. My dad was reversing his car off the driveway and I just see this big light in my face and I'm like, you look like a UFO. I'm sorry. We'll start that again. So basically, so I've always been very envious of the player that can just run out onto the pitch and ping balls around before they've even warmed up. As I say, one of my old roommates and ex-teammates, Sam Klukas, was one of those players. He used to drink liters of Coke in the bedroom, and I was one of them that used to have to stretch, do yoga, drink loads of water just to keep myself on a sort of standard level. So yeah, it's really important, as Hayley said, the older you get, the more your body changes and the more there is a big need for, keep your body in the right shape.
Do you guys believe that in coaching circles, the warm-up is given the credit it needs? Like, so for example, for me, when I was doing my level 2 football coaching, the guy there was saying about how a warm-up's not that essential and how he'll warm himself up on the pitch. And for me, from a fitness background, I was listening to that and I was just like, that doesn't sound good to me, mate. Like, if I've ever like not warmed up for a sporting activity, like it's a lot more of a struggle to get into it. What you guys experience? Do you think it's given the importance that it needs, or do you think it's not actually that important?
I think in terms of studies and stuff, I'm probably going to come at it from like my degree type of angle now. But in terms of studies, that like warm-ups are not really essential when you look at, you know, in football, in any sport. But I think for me as a player going through that, I would never say as a coach, I would never say we're not going to warm up, because as a player, I know it's important. You want to get mentally ready, because the warm-up's also about how it affects you mentally than it does physically. I know all my teammates coming back from injury and stuff, and myself when I was coming back from injury, a lot of the time it's mental. Like, you need to go into a tackle in the warm-up, or you need to do a certain amount of preparation. You can't just like go into it and expect to play and not sort of have that level of increasing your heart rate, or, you know, just getting mentally ready for it.
You hear some of the stories of like the players, I think Liverpool back in the 1980s, and how they literally used to just put their kit on in the changing room. They used to be betting all the way up until kickoff time, and they would barely do a warm-up, but they'd go out and they'd be winning multiple Champions Leagues and league titles. And I'm thinking maybe it's something to do with intensity as well, because I couldn't imagine the way football was played in this modern era, where you couldn't spend that time to be doing those intense warm-ups and getting your body ready. As you see already, there's the amount of injuries that are happening. I feel like you've got to be, your body needs to be set and ready for those high intensity sprints. The physicality of the game, I think it's imperative right now.
It's crazy, right? Because I think, if I remember this right, I think he gave the example of Messi going out for his warm-up, which was literally just juggling the ball about for a couple of minutes, and then the game started and he went and scored 4 goals.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, I mean, Messi's a bit of a freak. Like, the average player probably needs to have some sort of preparation for the game, a bit more than it comes to like doing a few keepy uppies.
That's right. Do you think that's got anything to do with the way Messi's game? Let's be honest, Messi has a bit of a blight in certain areas where he won't have to do as much running throughout a whole 90 minutes as maybe his other midfield compatriots. So do you think that he can get away with it a little bit more, the fact that he's only sprinting every so often? And what do you think?
Good question. He probably can, to be honest, because he's that good with the ball. He doesn't have to do as much running. I don't know. That's just my opinion. That's my take.
Say a warm-up could become maybe position specific. So, for example, you say Kante, like a box-to-box midfielder who's going to be doing a lot of running, would need a lot more of a warm-up, basically, and getting into it pre-game than say your striker who's just going to mooch about and hang around just in front of the defenders, maybe.
Yeah, but sometimes it's so hard to tell, isn't it? If it's a erratic game, it might be that the strikers are doing more running.
Yeah, he wouldn't know.
Yeah, so it's all, you know, it's all relative to what sort of game you're going to come up with. But I think, you know, from a coach's point of view, I always like it when everyone does the same warm up and they're all included in one thing, because, you know, it's almost like bringing the team together. You know, huddles in, we're all doing the same thing. It's just good for creating a team spirit. And going again to what you were talking about, Hayley, just getting that mental preparation involved. So important. But the next question that I was going to ask was, have you had any big injuries in the past yourself?
Yeah, my last season at Villa, it was a partial tear of my hamstring, but it caused ischial bursitis, which is like one of the rarest. Like, people, the physios at Villa didn't even know what it was until I got my scan back, and that bursa was pushing on my sciatic nerve, so I like couldn't move. If I moved my head, I was just getting shot. I don't know whether anyone's had sciatica before, but it was just shooting down my legs, and it was horrible. So I was out for about 10 months, 10.5 months, missed the whole season. So yeah, that was a bit of a pain. I just had to have injections though, so I didn't have to have any operations, touch wood, because that would have put me out for even longer. Because, you know, like you said with yours, they can take hamstring grafts and stuff like that, and then you have to recover 2 different body parts, and it's a bit of a nightmare. So I just had injections, and then it kind of went back to normal, but that was after 10 months or so. So quite a weird one that no one's really ever heard of.
Yeah. How did you feel during that? Like, did you think like this could be the end of the football career, or?
Yeah, because no one knew what was wrong. You know, I was seeing like so many specialists. I was seeing the men's physio at Villa as well, so that they know their stuff, but nobody could diagnose it. And then I was waiting ages for a scan because they don't pay privately for the women's team. They probably do now, but they didn't at the time. So I had to wait 4 months for a scan. So it was just. I was like, am I ever going to get back? It was just one thing after another, and nobody could tell me what I needed to do. I think sometimes when you know what it is, point blank, and someone says you need to do X, Y, and Z to recover, you know, you've got a plan. It's a little bit better mentally because you can just crack on with it. But for me, I was like, I was doing things and it was making other things worse because I didn't know what to do. So it was a tough one.
Bounced back pretty well, though, haven't you?
Say that again, sorry.
Bounced back pretty well.
Yeah. Touch wood now, I've had no other problems with my hamstring or anything, but I think that probably comes down to the stuff I'm doing outside of training, sort of stretching and mobility, strength work. So
would they be like your top tips then for like anyone who has a long-term injury? Would it be to get yourself doing some stretching, some strength work?
Yeah, I definitely say strength work is massive. Not OTT, like not doing like 1 rep maxes, ridiculously heavy. It's just like maintenance of certain movements, and just keeping like your muscle density good, and not, you know, letting yourself sort of get weak in movements and whatnot, because it massively transfers over to when you're playing.
One thing I always found, Hayley, especially depending on what club you're at as well, I know professional level, we had sports scientists, had like 2-3 physios at the club. So that maintenance and ability to be able to assist you with your recovery was always there. So there was days where particularly that I didn't have the motivation to, but there was always someone there by my side helping me through it. I know when I went to semi-professional level and I was having to go to work and come back home in the evenings at 7 p.m, 8 p.m. and train for 2 hours by myself, it was always a very big mental struggle for myself. It does make you as a person, you know, because you do want to be able to get back to a point where, you know, I mean, with the levels you were at before. But how do you find it? How are you on the mental side of things with that? Are you quite motivated yourself?
I am, yeah. I think that comes down to my job. So I'm a strength and conditioning coach, PT. I do all that sort of stuff. So for me, I think I could always keep myself ticking over with other things. I knew how to better myself. But I think a lot of women in the women's game, you don't get a lot of resources. So comparing it to the men's game, you wouldn't have like 3 physios and sports scientists, that sort of thing. So a lot of girls don't have people pushing them. So if they're not motivated like I was, it can be a struggle, and then they end up being out for a little bit longer because it's hard to get that motivation out of kind of nowhere.
Definitely. Yeah, we've done the talk about this before on individual training. Obviously, it's been a hot topic now because of COVID and all the lockdowns, etc. But yeah, just having someone else there to do it with you, or someone to train you, absolutely just helps you that 5-10 steps further.
Mm-hmm.
But doing it on your own, you know, that continuation can absolutely kill you sometimes, which is why I think sometimes it takes some people a bit longer to come back from injuries. But just going back to the prevention side of things, what can you do with your diet to prevent injury, Hayley? Like I've heard Babby and Delph talk before while he was at Man City, I think, about going on a vegan diet and how he talked about that's like cured him of ongoing injuries that he's had in the past. What's your take on that? And is there anything that you add to your diet that you think helps in that field?
It's interesting that he said that, because there's that quite a big debate at the minute whether you should be vegan, vegetarian, with pescatarian, whatever, with football because of like your protein intake. I mean, I'm now pescatarian, have been for a year, but I sometimes find it like at first I wasn't getting enough protein in, so I was getting little muscle niggles, and I just put it down to that because I wasn't having enough protein in that you would get from meat, sort of thing. So it's quite interesting that he said that. Actually, I didn't even know he was vegan. In terms of preventing, obviously you can't prevent contact injuries, but in terms of like muscle injuries, I think you can in a way with your hydration and just taking enough protein in. And then there's obviously having vegetables and stuff, because you can't have a terrible diet and play football at a high level, because you'll just end up getting like loads and loads of niggles. Certain foods help with reducing inflammation after games and training to help you recover for the next one. So I think in the men's game that they'll have like strict diets and that sort of thing, where they'll go in, they'll have the breakfast, lunch, and most of them will get dinner to take on the night. So the club can monitor, because they're training at such a high level. I think for younger athletes, kids, it's just more eating enough vegetables for a start. There's a lot of kids that I train and I ask them what they've had for breakfast, or I haven't had breakfast, or I'm like, you've just come for a training session, you've not had breakfast. So that's ridiculous. And then you're gonna overexert yourself in this session and you've got nothing to fuel it. And then also recovery, I'm like, what would you sort of typically have after this session? And they're like, oh, my mum's gonna take me to McDonald's. And I'm like, oh, just stuff like that. You just think you'd never be able to do that at like Premier League level, Championship level, high levels of sport, because you've got to keep doing it over and over again. Sometimes they'll do weights. Well, you'll know this yourself. They'll do weights in the morning, then train in the afternoon every single day, and then play 2 games a week. So to do that, your diet is massive, and hydration.
Is there any particular numbers that you'd recommend, Hayley? So we're on about like having sufficient protein intake. So is there any specific targets that you'd give someone? Because obviously it's not going to be, say, 100 grams across the board. It's going to be different for individuals, right?
Yeah, it's more so to do with your body weight and how, and also what you're exerting during a training session, which is hard for younger athletes to sort of monitor, because they won't have GPS vests that are going to tell them how much they've run and how many sprints they've done, that sort of thing. So it's just more. It's a good point, actually, because you can't really say to a kid, have this amount of protein. It's just make sure you're not having like really, really low levels. But it's probably something I should look into a bit more. Yeah. It's very hard to tell people.
I think it's more about the parents in it as well when it comes to the kids. Mm-hmm. I imagine a lot of parents are going to be like, well, you've done your training session with Hayley, let's go reward you with a McDonald's. Yeah,
that's exactly. And if they want to make it, they've got to get that out of their sort of. You've got to lose that mentality, I think.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Hayley, what would your typical pre-match meal be if you were to fuel yourself? What do you normally have before games?
Pasta dishes mainly, but we sort of play on Sunday afternoon, so beans on toast or scrambled eggs on toast, because I can't eat pasta at like 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. So.
I always.
No way Rooney used to do that though. I remember reading his book, and he would like get up at ridiculous o'clock. If they had like a 12 o'clock kickoff, he'd get up at 5 and eat pasta, and I was like, oh god, no, I can't make anything worse.
I heard Paul Merson say that as well before.
Nah, not having that, but that's just what he was so used to. So
it reminds me of my youth team days when we used to have like a really far away game, but the kickoff time would never change, so it'd be like in the 11 a.m. kickoff. So you have to think some days you have to set up on the coach from like, I don't know, 7, 8 a.m. to get to like the other side of London. I'm thinking I would never be hungry until about 11 a.m. as it was. So some days I used to eat like a cereal bar and then play the match, and I was thinking like, I don't know how I used to get through some of the games, you know.
Probably because you were so young, you wouldn't be able to do it as you get older. You need that energy balance, energy intake.
Even now with me, I find it difficult to eat before games, just purely because of match nerves.
Yeah.
Like I find if I do eat, it's got to be like 4 or 5 hours before. Actually clean, otherwise, just find it difficult.
I don't like feeling full. for a game at all. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, definitely. So next question was, do you recommend working on balance to prevent injury? Obviously, a lot of injuries can be something that's going on in the background. As we know, it can be like wear and tear of things just breaking down. For example, if you've got a imbalance in one leg and you might be putting pressure on the other leg, and it might be just slowly wearing and tearing away. Is that something that you'd recommend, working on balance to try and sort those issues out?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it's one of the main things you should like focus on every single sort of strength S&C session that you would do. I would go for more of a yoga type of balance. You know, you look at Ryan Giggs, he was saying that he prolonged his career because I think he played till he was 40, did he, for Man United? Something like that. And he was heavily into like yoga and holding different positions and that sort of thing. I think a lot of coaches will just get you on a wobble cushion and just balance on one leg for 30 seconds and then do another 30 seconds, which is fine when you're coming back from injury. But in terms of like preventing it in the first place, I think it's more about getting kids, even as you get older, just to move better, to like get kids to do the fundamental movements of a squat, a lunge, getting your core stability up with press ups and planks and holds and stuff like that. Because you see, I've trained a lot of the Walsall Academy lads. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm gonna. And some of them, the movement is just that they can't like move into a squat or lunge or anything like that. So in terms of the balance of that would be how I would angle it, not just sort of standing on one leg and hopping up and down, that sort of thing. But I don't know if anyone disagrees or agrees.
No, I think yoga is one of the best things that's like come out in the fitness industry for a long time. And I think last year a lot of people took it up because of lockdown that wouldn't normally do it. And I noticed myself after, I didn't do yoga in a serious sense, but I've done a couple of like the YouTube videos just to get myself into it and like introduce myself to it. And when football did reopen, I noticed I could reach balls that I wouldn't normally reach with my feet as soon as football restarted. And I was just like, there's no way, like this is just, it's got like magic, it's brilliant. Like, it's unbelievable.
It's mad, isn't it? These isolated sort of training sessions where you're doing the yoga and the proprioception and the balance. It's mad how boring they can be. You know what I mean? To try and sell it to a young person, they don't really want to know, do they? But
yeah, of course.
Those little percentages, when they sort of add up and build up, it builds it. It puts it all
adds
together.
to the bigger picture, yeah. Definitely.
I also want to mention how challenging a yoga session can be. Like, I know when I was very first done a yoga session at your True Fitness, we'll plug.
Yeah.
I was sweating like crazy, and I was just like, this is gonna be a nice, relaxing session. I've had a tough week, but it's the hardest one all week. It's crazy.
I think everyone kind of thinks it's just meditation, which can be an aspect of it, but you know, a lot of the time it is holding positions that you're not used to holding, so they're difficult. Sorry.
So yeah,
my favourite bit of yoga is the bit at the end where you got to lie on your back and close your eyes. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's certainly the talking point, yoga, because like a lot of the big names have done it. Obviously, you mentioned Ryan Giggs. I think Lam has done it a lot as well, and he obviously had a very, very long career at top flight as well. Ismail Diallo, who's a young lad who's at Burnley at the moment, who we had on the podcast, he swears by it as well. So yeah, like I do see it being a much bigger thing in the game as well. But yeah, just move on to the next question, Hayley. So in game, do you take any precautions to not getting injured? I.e., there might be sometimes that you dwell on the ball a little bit more, a little bit less in this case, or maybe because you're in a tight marking situation, you're thinking, okay, this might get me more prone to getting injured. Or maybe it's like how you land from a tackle, like is there like a certain way you kind of go down? So are there any tips in game that you kind of do to prevent getting injured, basically?
Yeah, I don't think about it at all. And I think sometimes if you do think about it, that's when you tend to get injured. Like if you go into like a 50-50 and think this could end bad for me, you tend to pull out 2 or 3%, and that other person's got it over on you then, and then you get injured. You see it quite a lot, mainly from players coming back from injury. You know, so many of my teammates and friends have had ACL injuries, and then they're worried about coming back in, so they back out of challenges when actually, you know, I understand it, you know, the mentality of it, that's difficult to overcome, but when you back out of a challenge, I think sometimes you're more likely to get injured. The one thing with me is like defending corners or defending set pieces. I'm always a bit like, I need to be careful when I go up for this header that I'm not gonna head-on collision with somebody, and I've had to get out of that because I've had concussions that many times that I've got to think, well, in fact, I need to stop thinking about it because that will make it worse, because you'll tend to back out then, whereas you might as well just go for it. But I think that's the only one for me really, is that I think of. Everything else, I wouldn't say dwelling on the ball or anything like that, or in tight spaces. You just got to play. It's instinctive, and try not to back out of things.
No. So true there. It's like I always find myself when I play, it's like when you kind of go for those like ones that you kind of go half-heartedly, you're always more likely to get injured, because like your leg is not fully extended and you kind of gone halfway, and you think if you trip at that certain angle, like you know you can re-land awkwardly. Even when I was younger as well, I used to always think, oh, if I go into a big tackle or something, like it's going to hurt. But in reality, when you actually do the tackle yourself, like you very rarely get hurt. It's the person getting hurt, admittedly. But yeah, it's just like I just think on that side, like tackling, it's all in the head really. If you can just get used to, you know, just doing your bit, and as you said, being instinctive, it helps so much more.
Be the one doing the hurting, Josh. Yeah.
Always, mate. Ruthless on the pitch, mate. Lovely. And actually, I had another question, but this one was more probably in relation to me. Or three of you might help me here, actually. But I usually find recently, after like I've had a game of 5-6 aside, even 11 aside as well, I always find for the next couple of days, I'm just knackered. Like I'll go to the gym, like I can't lift my max, or I'll go for a run and I'm like nowhere near my best. And like I always find this lingers on for about 2, 3, even 4 days. Like because I've like burnt myself out and I've given it my all at football, like it just kind of affects my everyday life. But are there any tips that you could give to try and sort that out? Maybe diet, maybe stretches. I'm not sure.
Retire.
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 I've already done that, mate. A long time ago. This is leisure now.
Join the club.
I would just say, you know, what we've talked about earlier, like nutrition, getting your protein in. A lot of players take protein shakes have protein shakes after games to aid recovery, hydration and stretching. I think we're all guilty of just doing a session and then just walking off. Especially if you've had a bad session or a bad game, you just want to get out straight away, unless somebody's forcing you to do stretches and take your recovery seriously. I think that's probably what it is, and just allow yourself to rest the day after. I think a lot of people try and hit the gym straight after, or the day after, you know, more. Let's say if you've had a bad game, you want to go for a run and clear your head the next day, or do a weight session. Sometimes you've got to listen to your body and just chill out. When you're younger, you can just bounce back and go. But as you get older, you can't really do that. No, so true. But what if your water intake's good, your protein intake's good, then what then? Like I'll do a little bit of stretching, not much. What else would you guys think about? Anything else?
Well, for me personally, I've I've been through stages where I've found it really difficult to recover. I'm talking sort of a week after, not even a couple of days. Like I got to a point where I hit my mid-20s, and no matter what I did, if I did anything at intensity, I really struggled the days after. I had to have massages. I hired someone to come to the house to literally try and flush it out my system. I found it helped to a level. It was just something else that I thought I would try. Again, the foam rollers, even going to swim baths and having a swim. I did the ice baths as well. Going from hot to cold, repeating that three, 4 times. So
how was that?
Yeah, interesting. I know the top clubs now, they've got the cryo chambers, which I've never been in one, so I wouldn't know what it feels like. But I know there's a lot more technology out there now to aid recovery. But yeah, I think you've just got to try. You've got to try different things and get to a point where something works for you. But I definitely know as you get older, you need to do more things. You can't. It's not just going to be the one. The water is not going to be enough.
I also think if you've like really done your best and you've really fatigued yourself, you shouldn't expect yourself to be back to 100% the next day. Like that's just entirely unrealistic.
Yeah. Like
let yourself rest and recover. Like.
Well, I used to find if I had a game on a Saturday, I'd feel pretty good on Sunday, Monday, but the Tuesday it would kick in. Like I would be exhausted on the Tuesday, say. I think, as I said, I think everyone's different. Everyone's body just reacts differently. You just got to find what's best for you.
So true. Yeah, no, I'll definitely. Well, like I hate the sound of it, but yeah, I'll have to try. Some ice bath.
Hey, sorry, I was gonna say, Hayley, what would you say is more important than the warm up or the cool down?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would probably say warm up. I think your preparation for a game is more important than your cool down, but they're both equally as important, I suppose. That's just my personal preference as a player. I hate cool downs. I don't mind a warm up because you're gonna go do something that you enjoy, unless you're on the bench. But cool downs they're just boring, aren't they? You just kind of, especially if you've lost, you just want to get out of there quick. So, or after a training session, you just want to sort of get home. Equally as important.
Yeah, it's so true, because after the game, like your mind is going at 100 miles per hour. Like you kind of got that progression in your head, and like even when you're walking off the pitch and like you're speaking to your teammates, like you're like speaking at 100 miles per hour still. Because like you're just so used to being in game, like I just couldn't think of anything worse than doing a warm down at that moment, definitely. But yeah, just to finish off then, Hayley. So, what are the 3 best tips that you would give to prevent injury? Like just judge on all the things that we've spoken about today.
I would say don't ignore niggles. I think we're all guilty of that. You've got a slight strain, you think, I can carry on, I can get through this, and you end up making it 10 times worse. So I think that one is quite important, especially for younger kids that want to play at a high level. I think a good pre-season is always up there for me. So getting your baseline conditioning, because you don't want to be doing that in season. Your baseline strength programs, all that sort of stuff. Like having a solid pre-season can massively help. Because if you start off getting niggles and that sort of thing, I always find it will just carry on for the season. And then probably another thing, if just work with the staff that you've got available as well. So if you've got a strength and conditioning coach that can give you a program to do away from training, like actually do it and invest your time wisely, or sports scientists, anybody, physios, that sort of thing, just take the help that you can get, and if people can, then have a coach yourself if you can afford it, that sort of thing, having a strength and conditioning coach if you've not got one at your club. but there'll always be people to help. There's so much information on the internet these days. There's YouTube videos on how to squat properly, how to lunge properly, all that sort of stuff. So taking that side of the game a bit more seriously